Hey everyone, and welcome to another Sasquatch Theory podcast. Tonight we head deep into the forests of Maine, one of the most heavily wooded states in America. Our guest Jeremy grew up hiking, camping, and spending countless hours in the wilderness. About 10 years ago, while staying alone at a remote Boy Scout camp, he experienced something that still defies explanation. What started as heavy footsteps outside a cabin quickly escalated into aggressive pounding, strange wood knocks, and what sounded like a massive creature moving through the darkness. If you enjoy listening to Sasquatch Theory, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and if you have a Bigfoot or cryptid encounter that you would like to share with me here on the channel, feel free to reach out sometime at sasquatchtheory@outlook.com. With all that being said, let's dive straight into our next Bigfoot encounter from the state of Maine. Jeremy, welcome to Sasquatch Theory. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on the show today. Jeremy, if you would, tell me a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and your experiences from the very beginning, please.
Yeah, thank you for having me. My name is Jeremy, and I live here in Maine. And I've always been an outdoors type of person. Um, when I was a kid, I joined the scouting program and was a member of the Boy Scouts for a long time, up until I was 18 years old. Um, so we were always doing like camping trips. Backpacking weekends, going to summer camp. Um, we were a pretty active scout troop. Um, Maine has a lot to offer as far as the outdoors and hiking and camping. So I've been all over the state of Maine. Um, I've been to Baxter State Park up in the North Maine woods, um, over in the White Mountains of Western Maine. um, Grafton Notch, the Bigelow Range, um, all over the state. I've been in some pretty remote areas, and Maine is pretty remote. Um, there's about 10.5 million acres of forested land in northern Maine, and it's remote. It's one of the largest unincorporated, undeveloped areas in the lower 48 states. Um, the combined forested area of Maine is almost that of the entire rest of New England. So it's the perfect environment for a creature such as a Sasquatch, if you choose to believe. And so tapping back into you know, the scouting part of my life, my encounter happened at a scout camp. Um, there's only a handful in Maine of active scout camps. I won't out the camp. Um, I'll spare that detail. But this camp it's somewhere that when I was younger, I was a counselor in training. I worked there for a few years in my teens, and into adulthood, I kind of came back for a couple of summers and worked there. Um, I was the rifle merit badge instructor. Um, so I know this camp very well. Um, Total months that I've spent camped out at that camp would be probably equivalent to a year. Um, I know the camp like the back of my hand. I know the animals that exist in camp or pass through. Um, it's fixated on a lake, and it's got a stream that bisects the camp into two. So there was one night. Um, this was probably about 10 years ago, and it was Friday night. Camp runs from Sunday afternoon when the scouts arrive until they leave on Friday night after a closing campfire. And if you're an adult, you have the option to either go home and come back, at the beginning of the new week, or you can stay at camp through the weekend and be right there for when camp starts back up. And usually I would go home, but that's like a 50-mile drive. So I decided this particular week that I was going to stay the night and through the weekend. So it's Friday night and I'm in my cabin. And I say cabin for lack of a better term, and I'm trying to be nice to uh, the Boy Scouts and the camp I worked at. It was basically just a rickety shack. Um, you know, no windows on it aside from these screened in. It's a screened in window, and it has like a flap that you gotta use this pulley system to pull up. So if you want to get any air in, you need to pull the rope. It lifts the flap. The screen keeps all the bugs out. That's what you have for a window. The door of the shack is just um, just a rickety door, and the only thing to lock it is like the old school hook and latch. Um, so that's what I was staying in. So it was about midnight, and so before I get into that, I should say, for all intents and purposes, I was alone. There might have been a few people that were also staying the weekend, but it's an almost 300-acre camp. I was pretty much alone. So it's Friday night, and I'm in my shack. I'm, watching videos on my phone, trying to fall asleep. Um, I get the light off. It's quiet, and then out of nowhere, I mean, completely out of nowhere, I start hearing these noises from behind my shack, and I know camp, and I know right where that noise is coming from. It's coming from one of the merit badge areas, and it's about 100 feet from where my cabin is. So I start hearing this massive, heavy stomping, pounding. Uh, it almost sounded like whatever was making that noise was, was wrestling something or fighting something. Um, but whatever it was, my first initial thought was, wow, whatever this is has to be just massive and heavy. Um, I could hear and feel the reverberations. Um, that's with how much force whatever was back there was hitting the ground. So I thought that was weird. Um, and all the normal things go through your rational mind. This could be a bear. It could be a moose or another member of the deer family. Um, so I was a little bit alarmed, and so I turned my light on, and I thought that, geez, whatever's back there, it's big, it's massive. Um, I threw the latch on my door, and just to act as a deterrent, the light on. If it was a bear, I figured it would see that there was somebody there, and it might scurry along. And same with a moose or a deer. They generally like to avoid people. Um, but it continued, and it got you know progressively louder and more aggressive sounding. Um, just this stomping and thrashing. Um, but it got weirder. Um, I at one point I thought that I heard something land in front of my cabin. Um, it's all pine needles and dirt. Um, when you throw something and it lands on pine needles and dirt, it's kind of a soft landing. And I swear I heard something land in front of my cabin. And, at that point, I'm thinking, it's probably somebody playing a joke on me. Um, somebody's out there, they're trying to pull an over on me. So I just kind of sat there. I didn't want to make any noise. I didn't want, if there was somebody out there playing a joke, I didn't want them thinking that they got me. Just ignore it. It'll stop. It'll go away. But it didn't stop. Um, it it progressed to something that really kind of freaked me out. Um, if as a young boy, we're in the woods and we do things like probably the one thing that every boy has done is gone out in the woods and you know taken a stick and whacked it on a tree, and it's fun, but it also makes a very distinct sound, and that's what I started to hear. It was as if somebody took a big stick and whacked it up against a tree. And it was two knocks, 1, 2. Um, and then there would be some more thrashing, some more stomping. Um, and then, again, 1, 2, whack, whack. And again, I'm thinking bear, moose, maybe it's a couple of buck deer fighting. Um, but that would make more of kind of like a rattle type of sound. This was crisp and clear. um, Whack, whack. um, and again, I'm thinking maybe someone's playing a joke on me, but it got weirder. And this is where I knew that this wasn't a person playing a joke on me. The camp is cut in two by um, I'm going to call it a river because its official name is a river. It's a wide stream of gentle flowing water, and it cuts camp in two and it empties into the lake. But where we are on that river, it's murky, it's kind of slimy. Um, it's home to a nasty snapping turtle. Nobody goes in the water there. The running joke is that's worth -10 showers. If you jump in the river there, it's you get a shower like 10 times. Nobody goes in there for a swim. You go swim in the lake. There's also a footbridge. If anybody wants to cross to the other side of camp, you walk across the bridge. So imagine my shock and surprise when at midnight I hear this gigantic splash. And I know that whatever was back behind my cabin had just jumped into this river. And I can hear it swimming across. I can hear the water ripples. I can hear it. And I'm like, okay, that's nobody I know was jumping in there. This is obviously an animal. Um, but I continued to hear that knocking sound from the other side of the camp. Um, and it kept getting progressively further and further away. And it was always two knocks at a time. And so it was moving further and further away. And again, I know this camp very well. I know the area very well. I could tell based on the knocks that whatever this was, it was following the shoreline of the lake. And eventually the knocking became so faint, it had moved so far away that I could not hear it anymore. Um, and then eventually I went to sleep. Um, and yeah, that's what happened to me.
All right, Jeremy, thank you very much for sharing your experiences with me. And they certainly sound terrifying. It sounds like this creature was being aggressive and territorial. Why do you think it was doing a succession of two rapid wood knocks? What do you think that means?
Well, I've had a lot of time to think about why it could have been doing that. And, you know, I'm trying to put myself in that animal's position. Why would I be making a tree knock? What possible reasons could I have for doing that? And I honestly think that it was a form of communication. Um, Either it was communicating to me, I think, or it could have been potentially communicating with another Sasquatch, in my opinion.
Yeah, I
Um,
would agree with that. It sounds like there were others in the area and the clan was moving through the cabin that you were staying at. And yeah, it's a good thing that you put yourself in that position to kind of ponder as to why the creature would have been doing that. And maybe it was doing it because it just wanted to let you know, like, hey, I'm here, I'm moving through the area. I didn't want to just sneak through there and possibly startle you. Like, it warned you to know it was there.
sure. And, I absolutely believe that, they are both nomadic and that they also have a territory. And like what you just said, I do think that this particular Sasquatch was moving through my area. Um, but I also get the feeling that, you know, this one might not have been so benevolent. I think this one was aggressive. Um, just based on the noises that it was making, I definitely got the feeling that whatever was out there was aggressive and could potentially harm me. But again, I do think that when it realized it wanted to make itself known.
Yeah. Are there people usually staying in that cabin or was it vacant for a while before you happened to stay there?
So it was only inhabited by me. Um, when you go work at this camp, you're assigned a cabin, and that's your cabin for the entire summer. Some people bunk with multiple people, but this particular summer in my cabin, it was just me. Um, and I was fine with that. I'm a grown man, and yeah, I'd like to have my own cabin to myself. So that was fine. But on this particular night, I kind of wish that I had had a cabin mate, someone that could have shared that experience with me. Um, because I'm sure, as you know, when you tell somebody that you have an experience like that, and there's nobody to witness it, and you don't have audio or video, there's no you can't embroider a story enough to make them truly believe you. So in this case, I wish I had had somebody there with me.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And I definitely understand the isolating feeling of having an experience like this and nobody else around to validate it. But you know it happened, and that's all that matters. What time of year did this encounter happen? Were there certain things growing in the forest, like mushrooms, berries? Were the fish abundant there this time of year? Why do you think the
Yeah.
creature was around?
Well, so you know, again, Maine has an abundance of small game animals. There's no shortage of berries. There's no shortage of fish. For carnivorous animals. This was in late July or early August. I think it was late July, but somewhere right around there. So really, that's the height of the summer. All your berries are in full bloom. They're fruitful, blackberries, red raspberries, blueberries. The only thing that grows as far as that at this camp would be and blackberries and raspberries. There's no blueberries. Um, but there is, again, there's a body of water, and there's multiple bodies of water, and there is a deer population as well. So I do think the combination of the deer population there and the body of water, I think that's important, because in almost every Sasquatch experience that I've heard and listened to, those two things have to be present. A a food source and a water source. And this camp had both.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes sense. And there is a ton of forest in Maine. It's the most heavily forested state in the United States, with roughly 89 to 90% of land being covered by trees. And yeah, you were in the perfect spot. There's water, there's food, it's an isolated area. It's the perfect time of year when things are growing and abundant. And yeah, it sounds like you got caught in between this creature and where it wanted to go.
Well, and another thought about this encounter that I've had time to think about is that it may have been it may have been um, killing something. It might have been killing a small game animal or a deer, for food. I've given that thought as well, because, like I said, it sounded like it could have even been wrestling something to the ground. Um, so I think that could be a possibility of why this particular night I heard this. But I'll add a little context to this story by saying that I had another incident that summer that I had never had happen. There was one particular night where I had gone up to the head of the road to smoke a cigarette, and no flashlight. It was I was walking along the camp road. I know it like the back of my hand. So I'm walking back into camp, and it's me and my buddy, and out of nowhere we can hear from our left side just this, beating feet. Like, it sounded like a horse galloping through the woods, and it's pitch black. Cannot see a thing except for the dirt on the road in front of us, and it's coming right for us. And all I did was I, kind of braced, and I took a step back, and whatever was running through the woods, it ran either directly behind me or in front of me. Um, and what I think was happening was, I think that a deer was being chased by a predator, because it was clearly 4 feet, it sounded like four hooved feet, like a horse galloping through the woods. And, definitely a member of the deer family. But if you ever walk up on a deer, they run away. They'll stand there, they'll look at you, and then, after a minute, they're gone. They don't run towards you. They can smell you, they can see you. So I believe I was almost trampled to death by a large deer that might just uh, might just have been running away from whatever I heard and had an encounter with.
Yeah, very well. Could have been. Is that the same area that you had the experience at, the same campground?
Y- Yes, yep. It was the same summer, and I can't for the life of me remember if it was before or after I had my, what I believe was a Sasquatch experience. Um, I can't distinguish if it was before or after, but it was the same summer, and it was the same camp, and it was the same general area of camp.
Oh, wow. So they could have possibly been around in the area hunting deer. Did you notice a lot of deer in that area before these strange experiences?
Sure. Yeah, like I said, Maine in general, but specifically this camp had a pretty healthy population of deer. Um, so I definitely I saw a lot of deer working there.
Yeah. And it definitely makes sense. And deer will usually go out into people's yards and expose themselves to people if they're being pursued by predators.
Yeah, and Maine, we don't have a shortage of predatory animals in this state. Um, Bear predatory, we have Canada lynx, we have bobcat. Um, but given the context of what I experienced and what I believe was a Sasquatch, it really eliminates any nuance for me about the night where I was almost trampled by something. Um, Given the experience I had, I firmly believe that a deer being chased by a Sasquatch almost trampled me. And that might seem a little bit comical, but in hindsight, it's frightening. Um, both experiences to me were very frightening.
Yeah, for sure.
And people will ask the obvious question, well, hey, why didn't you record it? Why didn't you get a video or record? And quite honestly, I wish I had. I wish I had recorded. It would have been too easy because I had my phone. I was watching videos as when this happened. But the thought to do that never crossed my mind because of how afraid I was. I was more focused on what the heck is this thing? What is making this noise? What is doing this? And the sense of being in danger um, kind of took over, and the thought never crossed my mind. And unless someone's in an experience where they've been truly terrified, they'll probably never think that way.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And it definitely does sound like Sasquatch activity. I don't know an animal that big that would knock. And yeah, it sounds like it was angry and possibly chasing deer. And what did the stomping sound like when you initially heard the noises? Do you think it was like just walking or like ground stomping? What are your thoughts about that?
Well, uh, I think that it was doing a little bit of everything. There was definitely some ground stomping, but it also sounded again like it was wrestling something to the ground. Um, and again, this it came out of nowhere. I mean, this was I didn't hear anything approaching. It just, out of nowhere, I started to hear just this massive stomping on the ground. Um, and I just remember thinking that whatever this is massive. It has to weigh hundreds and hundreds of pounds to make that type of pounding, and to the point where I could feel it. I could feel the reverberations. So it was definitely doing a lot of ground pounding.
Yeah. And it could have been that they were coordinating a hunt, working together, pushing deer into a trap, or they were just pissed off that you were there. It's hard to say, really.
Yeah, and I've thought that too because usually on the weekends at this camp, there's really nobody there. So they could have been banking on the fact that hey, we're going to have access to our food uninhibited by the people that are usually here. That certainly could be a possibility, but you know, the more I've thought about it, I really do think that this Sasquatch and potentially the others that may have been with it, I think they were just moving through because I had never heard anything like that before or since. at that camp or anywhere for that matter. Um, that was a one-off situation.
Yeah. And like you said earlier, you try to put yourself in the Sasquatch's mind and viewing it from his perspective. And as a hunter, I will plan my hunts. I'll look at a map, and finally I get out there. And if somebody else is occupying that area or someone else shows up, I kind of panic. I don't know what to do. I potentially evaluate, should I leave the area, should I move somewhere else? And it bothers me when I go to a remote area and someone shows up on a four-wheeler or just walks through the field that I'm hunting, whether they're just hiking in the area or just exploring. It's like, well, now they walk through the area, there's scent all over the place. What am I going to do? And it kind of upsets me a little bit. I mean, there's nothing I can do about it, obviously, but I feel like the
Yeah, no,
Sasquatch
not when you're hunting public land.
yeah, I feel like the Sasquatch in your situation had the same mindset. They're like, we're going to go down to the shoreline. We're going to look for clams, fish, chase deer, whatever. And when they get there, they're like, oh man, someone's here. This completely messes up our plans. And they kind of let you know.
Yeah, and again, totally possible that was what was going on, given everything that happened. And yeah, I hunt as well, and it frustrates me, like you just said, when there's somebody else there, and whether it's they walk through to get to their spot, or you hear them take their shot at their deer. It is upsetting. Um, so there's a bunch of possibilities for what really is the reason why they were there on that particular night. But whatever the reason was, they were there. They were just there. And I was in the right area at the right time, and I encountered something truly spectacular. And I might go the rest of my life never experiencing anything like that again. But I'll remember it.
Oh, yeah, for sure. It's a memorable experience and you'll never forget about it. And you wouldn't have contacted the Sasquatch Theory podcast if you didn't think it was Sasquatch. And from what you told me, I definitely feel like it's Bigfoot activity. And have you went back to the area to try to recreate that situation or look around for tree structures, tracks, or any evidence that the creature was around?
Yeah, so the next day, I did go out and I looked in the immediate area. Um, the problem that I encountered was that, with it being a very well used camp, there's hundreds of campers there every week, plus staff. The ground is all pine needles and dirt, and it was really difficult for me to tell what was potentially this animal, this Sasquatch, versus what's been, the normal wear and tear on the paths and the camping areas and such. So after doing a little bit of investigating the next day, I really didn't find anything out of the ordinary. Um, there are a lot of lean-to structures that get built by campers at this camp. So again, that was another thing where, if I were to look out and see a emergency shelter or a little lean-to with some sticks and brush, that wouldn't be out of the ordinary, but it would be hard to distinguish.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I know a lot of people in the comments have experiences just like yours, and they don't feel like it's important to report it on the channel. They're just like, it's not really that big of a deal. I didn't see one. But I feel like they are important because later on, someone might have a face-to-face encounter in that same area, and I can be like, look, this guy named Jeremy shared his experience from the same area, and it definitely helps. In the past, I've had multiple people from like Humboldt County, California, or Hayward, Wisconsin, share experiences. And later on, more people report strange things happening in the same area, and I can direct them towards those podcasts, and it really makes them feel a lot better. And then all of a sudden, more people are contacting me with similar experiences, and after a while we can kind of put together the data and be like, okay, this is a hot spot.
Exactly. And, it's creating a database. The more, like you said, the more people that are comfortable to come out and share their experience, the more information we're going to have. And you are right that, I wouldn't be coming on and talking to you and putting my name out there, knowing what the stigma is, if this just never happened. Why would somebody, you know, put themselves in that position where they're going to be ridiculed or laughed at? And I've posed that same question, to Maine guide forums on Facebook here in Maine. Hey, if someone has an experience, please send me a message. I'd love to talk about it. And people are hesitant to, but there are more people out there that have had experiences that they're afraid that it will ruin their reputation. Um, but you're right that talking about it, it makes you feel good, and also it encourages other people to come forward.
Oh yeah, for sure. And the skeptics are brutal out there. There's a lot of haters when it comes to people talking about their experiences, but the truth is they weren't there. And yeah, I get that all the time with the channel. People just being angry, like, show me proof, show me a photo, show me some evidence. There's zero evidence. And I'll post like possible tree structures, and people say there's zero evidence that Bigfoot made that structure. And my argument is, show me proof that they didn't. Like, how do you
Right,
know?
right, exactly. How do you know? And also, they're not the ones that are out there, you know, uh, researching or investigating and coming across these things in the environment. They're, at home listening to it or hearing about it. And, you know, being out there and experiencing it is totally different than hearing an anecdotal story.
Right. It's the people that don't have any experiences, any encounters that are advocating that there's no Sasquatch out there. But yeah, again, show me proof that Bigfoot doesn't exist, because there's thousands and thousands and thousands of eyewitnesses and people that have found strange things and have heard things that they know is no natural animal out there. And yeah, I feel like there's more evidence showing that Bigfoot does exist.
I completely agree. And, we know that there are bear. You said you're an avid hunter. You're probably more experienced in hunting than I am. I know there's black bear in Maine. In all the time that I have been camping and hiking, I have never come across a black bear. I've never seen a black bear in the wild,
Wow. Yeah.
but they're there. But they're there. So
Hmm.
apply that same line of thinking to a Sasquatch.
Yeah,
And
that blows my mind, because like I've never seen a black bear in the wild, and I've never seen a mountain lion in the wild, and I've seen a handful of Sasquatch. So to me, Sasquatch are more common than black bears and mountain lions.
exactly. Yep. Experience is perception.
Hmm. Yeah, but I completely understand the skeptics. I mean, it's something you got to see or experience to believe, but still, you got to remain open minded, because there's a lot more woods out there than what people would like to believe. They're living in a box and
Of
believing
course.
what media is telling them.
Of course. And again, you had an episode a while ago where there were some encounters in Idaho. And Idaho is similar to the northern Maine woods as far as total landmass that is like unincorporated and undeveloped. And you really don't know what could be in the middle of all this unincorporated, unorganized, and undeveloped forest. I mean, they're so massive. There could be anything in there, and you'll never know because most people never go there.
Yeah, I would agree with that. There's a ton of woods in Idaho, especially if you stretched out all the mountains. Like, there'd just be so much land.
Oh yeah, yep, yep.
So, what do you think the Sasquatch are? What do you think these beings are?
Well, you know, I don't know. Um, I've heard innumerable theories, as have yourself, but I really don't know what they could be. Um, I'm going to apply the Occam's razor theory and just say that the simplest explanation is often true. I think they're an ape like creature that is bipedal and um, that bleeds. It's flesh and blood. And I think it, might be a megafauna that it could be remnant of the Ice Age, Maine, and I mean northern United States. We were all covered in ice glaciers, really not that long ago in history, and so I think that it's a bipedal, flesh and blood, ape-like creature that could be left over from the Ice Age, but I have no idea until we find a body of one and can examine it. We can't say with certainty.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I do feel like Sasquatch is a creature from the Ice Age. And the features really match a lot of animals that existed in that time, as far as like the woolly rhino or the woolly mammoth. And I feel like since they're able to like deroot full size trees, they were able to hunt big animals such as like woolly mammoths and creatures that existed back then.
Of course. I mean, we did as human, like as our species, we did. So why wouldn't a larger species, like us, be able to? I mean, yeah, I agree. I completely agree.
Yeah, and that body mass is designed for really, really cold weather. I think the smaller you are, the quicker the body heat leaves the body. But when you're that big, it's able to trap the body heat. And yeah, it seems like they've evolved to to live in our day and age. But yeah, it doesn't stop a Sasquatch. It doesn't need to be cold outside for them to exist.
No, certainly not. And you kind of breezed another uh, area of this topic where there are different archetypes. I believe the ones that exist in the northern United States and up into Canada. I think those are, the larger of the species. They need to be bigger. They need to be able to, generate body heat. And I think the ones that exist in the southern United States are smaller. It's hotter down there. They don't need as much hair or fur. They don't need to be so big. Um, so I think it depends on where in the country and where on the continent really you are. Um, but yeah, I would say that the bigger Sasquatch exists in the northern half of the continent, and based on my experience listening to the sounds that this was making, close to me, I would I would say yeah, um, they're massive. They are they can be incredibly massive.
Oh yeah, for sure. And it's cool you got to witness the Sasquatch potentially on a hunt and the rapid two wood knocks in succession moving throughout the area, and you can hear it far off in the distance. It sounds like they were pushing something away. It sounded like, from what you described, you could hear something struggling or like, I don't know, like ground stomping, like they were chasing something. So that's possibly what was happening. It's hard to really say, but I think they were hunting.
Well, and do you mind if I ask you a question, Miguel?
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, I've had time to also think about that knocking sound. And, you know, in order for it to have moved so far away and to make such a loud knocking sound, it would have had to have been a really durable, sturdy, strong stick or tree. And they can rip up a tree and use that, but it would have had to have been incredibly durable because of how far away it was and how easily I could still hear the knocking. Do you believe that it could be either knocking or clapping? because I've heard people mention clapping as the knocking sound.
Yeah, it could have been. It used a stick and it was beating a tree. It was mouth popping or clapping or even hitting its chest. It's really hard to say. A lot of people speculate whether they do the knocks as a form of echolocation. And yeah, I think any of those theories are plausible.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. And again, until we find a specimen and can bring one in, um, we'll never know. And until that happens, we can only speculate.
Yeah, for sure. And it's hard to really know what these creatures are up to because they've evolved physically and spiritually, and humans are evolving just physically through technology. And I think we've lost touch with our spiritual side, and they don't need a car, they don't need a house, they don't need a fire, and their ways are much different than ours.
Yeah, 100% agree. Um, and again, you're kind of touching on it, with that comment that they might have developed different senses than us. Um, you know, they could have the ability to, sense your camera or your technology. They definitely have a better sense of smell. You know, if they don't have some type of infrasound, they definitely have the ability to smell far better than us. And whether that's they're smelling the material that your camera is made out of, or if they're smelling you, similar to other animals that we know, like a bear or members of the deer family, they can smell really well, almost like a dog. So that could be one of the reasons why we've yet to bring one in, and why people haven't been able to really get a good quality video or image.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And their senses are truly out of this world. All right.
Yeah,
Well, Jeremy, I think you did an excellent job at documenting your experience, and I appreciate you for reporting it on the channel. And if you encounter anything else in the future, definitely feel free to reach out. I'd love to hear about it.
absolutely. I'd love to be able to experience something else, but we'll see. And feel free to come to Maine anytime.
I appreciate that. And if you go back out into the wilderness, just be careful because we don't know what these things are. There's many claims where people know exactly what they are, what planet they came from, or if they're good, if they're bad. And yeah, I don't know if any of that's true, but I do know they're out there and it seems to be unpredictable. There's good ones and there's bad ones, of course. So just be careful and mindful of all that. Thank you for joining us on another episode of Sasquatch Theory. Jeremy's experiences raise some interesting questions. What was creating the heavy impacts outside the cabin? What was making the repeated wood knocks along the shoreline? And what large creature was racing through the darkness toward him and his friend that summer night? As always, I'll leave that up to you to decide what Jeremy encountered, but Jeremy knows what he experienced, and I'm sure he's thought about it over and over again, did some research on it, came across a lot of Bigfoot experiences that match up with what he experienced, and came across my channel and decided to contact me. So I think we all know what's going on out there. Of course, skeptics will say that was just a moose, but I don't know, mooses don't wood knock like that, and it seems to line up with Bigfoot activity. If you've experienced something unusual in the woods, seen a cryptid creature, or have a story you'd like to share, send me an email sometime at sasquatchtheory@outlook.com. Until next time, stay safe, keep searching for the truth, and I'll see you on the next episode of Sasquatch Theory.